Spotlight. I'm Ed Juenka. I've just been joined by Glenford Malone, Deputy Chairman of the National Risk Assessment Steering Group, along with Mr. Leon Whitley, Chairman of the Public Education Committee. Brothers, welcome to Spotlight. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Thank you.
Yes, this is a big event, annual event coming up, the National Risk Assessment. Tell us what a National Risk Assessment actually is.
Well, a national risk assessment is really the jurisdiction's tool is going to use to make sure that the economic viability of the jurisdiction remain intact. Effectively, what we're going to do, we're going to take a holistic view of the jurisdiction risk from a money laundering, terrorist financing, and proliferation of weapons of mass destruction financing. We're going to look at how the jurisdiction deals with these issues, what are the risks to the jurisdiction, from an economic perspective, from a legal perspective, and when that process is over, we're going to come up with a mechanism to mitigate these circumstances, so thereby continue to maintain our economic prospects here in the BVI.
And this all has to do with financial services?
No, it's financial services is part of it, but it has to do with the overall economic activity in the territory. Because we're going to look at financial services, we're going to look at what we call dealers in precious metals, stones, high-value goods such as the yachting industry. We're going to look at real estate agents and lawyers, etc. So it's just not the financial services, even though it deals a lot of purely financial transactions and the like, but not solely from that industry.
So you're going to be assessing perhaps many of the companies in the territory? That's what it sounds like to me, that you're coming house to house, looking under every company's bed.
Well, effectively, I think you're right, but we're not going to be looking under every person's bed. We're going to come to every company that we look at. We have what we call a pre-assessment questionnaire, which we're going to send out to every company. Each company is going to get a different questionnaire, ask a number of questions. We look at those responses, then we'll say, well, these are the companies we need to be targeted, and we'll go into those institutions and sit down with those people and ask them a number of questions. So it is that type, but not looking under your bed per se.
Not quite that intrusive.
No.
And the pre-inspection questionnaires are actually on the horizon, and they should be circulated in the coming weeks.
Okay. So I like the listening audience to know what these companies are. They're categories of companies, or companies generally, jewelry stores, rent a cars. Well, give us a list of the companies that needs to be assessed.
Well, maybe we should go back a bit, because the whole gist of the assessment comes out of the Financial Action Task Force 40 recommendations, which is geared towards prevention of money laundering, terrorist financing, and the like. And within that those recommendations, the type of companies you should be looking at, which would be financial institutions, which in the BVI would be your banks, your trust companies, your insurance companies, investment business. But they also talk about designated non-financial services, business and professions, your lawyers, your dealers in high-value goods. For us, we look at furniture dealers, we look at the real estate agents, and those are the type of companies that are going to get the questionnaire. Not necessarily hotels, because they don't necessarily deal in those type of transactions which involve that type of activity.
Rent-a-cars?
No, because they're not high-value goods. In terms of you rent a car, you're simply paying a small portion of money for rent. But for example, if you're dealing with a boat, you're buying a boat, or a yacht dealer that is going to sell a boat for a couple $100,000, then that person is required to, within the recommendation, to do what we call customer due diligence. And so that's what we're going to be looking at.
Jewelry stores?
Yeah, who sells.
So conceivably, if I have any kind of business, I could have a terrorist. Say I'm supporting a certain cause. So I'm supporting the Palestinians, and I want to help them to finance their war against oppression, right? And I have a company that, I don't know, rent cars. Is it conceivable that I could be passing money, they could be sending money to me to run through my business so that they could use to legitimize that money and use it for weapons of mass destruction. Is that something that's conceivable? Or?
I think it's conceivable, but then you have on the other side of that, when you have a car dealership would necessarily have an account with the bank. The bank is responsible now to know who that customer is, who's running that car dealership, or that car rental, what kind of income that person brings in, and look at that to determine whether or not there's red flags, such as he may be depositing a certain amount of cash at a particular time when his business may not be generating that. So, but along those lines, yes, we get towards...
So those are things you'll be looking at?
Well, we'll be looking at them from a perspective such as non-profit organization. Under the FATF standards, they recognize non-profit organizations worldwide as a risk to the system, i.e. you could use them along the lines that you mentioned. So therefore, we're going to be looking at non-profits, not to say there's any issue particularly with non-profit in the BVI, but we're going to look at them as a sector. They're going to get a questionnaire, respond. We look at them and determine whether they pose any risk for us here in the BVI.
So you're not looking to see if they're actually doing it, but you look they're actually laundering money, or they're actually assisting terrorists. You're looking to see if in their businesses there are loopholes that make them vulnerable to this type of behavior. Is that what the assessment is going to be mostly?
Yes, exactly, because what it says is we're going to come in and we're going to ask you if you have policies, you have procedures set up. We're going to tell you, well, do you understand what the law says? Are you doing what the law says? And if you effectively say no, then that institution will be part of the wider community who may pose a risk. And we would say then at the end of the assessment, we'll say to the government effectively, this is the risk these institutions pose. Here are the recommendations. This is what you need to do to minimize these risks.
Is there any particular preparation from an educational standpoint that the companies that will be assessed need to have or have done, or need to information they need to know to be prepared for when you come around with your assessment?
Well, we've just produced a brochure that's going to be going out for wider circulation in the coming weeks, and it speaks to the whole history of the FATF, the CFATF, which is the sub-regional body, and what they do, and also teaching generally about money laundering, terrorist financing, and trying to give people a general idea. So it even goes beyond just the people that will be subject to the questionnaires. Our goal with this is to educate the wider public also. And you'll be seeing more coming out in that regard in the near future.
Okay. So the questionnaire is going to be your primary means of information gathering. How will the process work?
Well, yeah, the questionnaire would be the information gathering. Essentially, all look in the mirror as a national body, and that goes towards actually identifying the risks within the jurisdiction, which then translates into what we're going to do in terms of formulating reports, contingency measures, corrective measures. Because the thing that you have to realize with this mutual evaluation, which comes up in 2017, this assessment is really for us to get to the point where we know where we are. And then once we get there, we can begin speaking to how we're going to improve and demonstrate our improvement leading up to this 2017 evaluation. So essentially, this risk assessment is all look in the mirror to assess where we stand. And that also brings on another point. The information that will be used in the risk assessment will be confidential, and it will be used specifically for the National Risk Assessment. And it's important that when people actually fill out the questionnaires that they're honest, open, and frank in their responses, because the risk assessment will only be as good as the information we get out of it. So there's no need to say, well, okay, you're a trust company with the Financial Services Commission. I don't know, they're going to use this against us down the road, or, you know. So the whole thing is we need people to really be open, honest, and we need a good response rate.
So the businesses shouldn't fear that it's not an attack on the businesses.
No.
It's not a witch hunt.
No,
No, it's not, and no individual business is going to be identified in this process. It's geared towards, we want each business to understand, tell us the truth, tell us exactly what's happening. Because in 2017, when we've been assessed by Caribbean Financial Action Task Force from an international perspective, these are assessors, people who know what to look for, are going to come and look. And they're going to ask some of the same companies, because they're going to be doing their own independent tests. Mm-hmm. And we want to be able to say, yes, we have identified those issues and we have addressed them, and we have addressed them satisfactory. And we want those people to say, yes, they have. And say that again, because when we was last assessed in 2008 from CFATF, we had worldwide one of the best ratings. You know, we were one of the most compliant jurisdiction in the world. There was FATF at that time had 16 what they call core and key recommendations. These are the ones they say you should meet. And we were compliant, or largely compliant, in 14 out of the 16. And there was only, I think, 2 jurisdictions that was compliant in 15 out of 16. There was none for 16. So we were among, not regionally, but internationally, one of the best. And come 2017, we want to ensure that continues, and that's what the National Risk Assessment is the starting process of.
Okay. But don't you want to catch some people doing illegal activities as well? Or that's not your role?
No, that is not our role, and that is not the intent of the National Risk Assessment. We're not coming into anyone's institution to try to figure out if they're laundering money. We're coming in to try to see, well, do you have the policies and procedures in place? Are you doing what you're supposed to be doing? And if not, how could we help you to put in the right systems so the country as a whole, a jurisdiction as a whole, reduces its risk? So we're not going in and say, okay, yes, we saw this company doing X, Y, and Z. Police, look at this. That is not the National Risk Assessment. That is why we say we want honesty, we want you to be frank, and we want you to say what you're doing, and so we could get it right.
Okay. Are you going to be, is a team going to be going to an NGO, for example, and saying, let me see your procedures, how you get your money in, how you process the money, how you save it, how is this disbursed? Are you going to be looking at, are you going into a company as a team, as a group, or individuals, and looking at that company from that perspective?
Yes, we have. What we're going to do as part of the process is we're going to train assessors. Mm-hmm. We have a training coming up the first week of July 8th to 10th. We're going to train approximately close to 40 or 50 people, and we're going to use some of that subset to do what we call trained assessors. So these are individuals, we're going to explain what they need to do, and they're going to come into your institution, sit down with you. It's not an interrogation. They're not coming as investigators. They just come in to say, okay, you have submitted X, Y, and Z. Clarify this for us. You didn't respond to this effectively, and say, well, wait a minute. Did you not respond because you didn't understand or you don't have the information? Because what their goal is to get further information from the respondents, whichever institution that is, that what they're doing and how they're doing it. So when we get to the end, again, it's all about getting to the end, that we have the true picture of what's actually going on there.
Okay. So the role then, it could be said then that the role of the assessment is to strengthen the business community that perhaps maybe come at risk of money laundering, terrorist financing, or weapons of mass destruction proliferation, to strengthen them against these things happening.
Yes, and one has to, we have to realize as the BVI is part of the full international community in terms of financial services, tourism, anything. And if you as an individual go to, say, Scotiabank, and you want to send money to the United States, Scotiabank has to use their correspondent banking relationship, another bank in the US effectively. If we don't look at our risk, address our risk, and somebody say, well, BVI, you're non-compliant, you know what that means? That means you can't go to Scotiabank no longer and simply carry on that transaction easily, because then they'll say, well, wait a minute. Instead of relying on Scotiabank, they'll say, well, no, you have to give us all the information. Therefore, it makes it much easier to do business, much harder to do business, and creates problems for us in the international community. So it's a benefit for, sometimes we look at it abstractly, and we say it's only financial services. It's only the financial services sector that affected. But when it comes to the fact that tourism now becomes effective because you don't have a good banking system, you don't have a good reputation, all of it is connected, so we must make sure that we get it right.
So we have to take a look at the full economy
Yes.
to make sure that we have the best practices and we have eliminate the risk of those offenses that the international community deem as dangerous to life and limb, I guess, if you want to say, put it that way.
Yes.
Okay. We're going to take a break, and we're going to come back and we're going to talk some more of when the process is going to begin, what should the businesses do to anticipate your comment on what their expectations should be, and how you want them to conduct themselves in the relationship between the assessors and the businesses that's going to be assessed. Right after these words from our sponsors. Keep it locked right at the Spotlight.
Spotlight is brought to you by Tortola Concrete Limited and H. Lavity Stout Community College.
Welcome back to Spotlight. I'm here with the Deputy Chairman of the National Risk Assessment Steering Group, Mr. Glenford Malone, if you just joined us, along with Leon Wheatley, Chairman of the Public Education Committee of the Risk Assessment. And we're talking about risk assessment that's coming up. That's coming up in what?
July, we're starting where the questionnaire is going to be sent to institutions beginning in July. July 15th, we're expecting to send the questionnaire. Effectively, some questionnaire are going to go physically to some institutions, and other institutions are going to be allowed to complete the questionnaire via the website. And we're giving them, I think, till the end of August to complete that questionnaire and send the response back to us. Then we'll take a few weeks. We'll analyze the questionnaire. Then the assessors will come into the financial all the institutions who we choose. And after that, we're looking to end the process in March of next year to have a final report for the government. Effectively, it's going to be a final report for the National Risk Assessment Council, which comprises a number of government individuals, which is led by the Premier. And we'll present the report to them, and they will take that report and present it effectively to the government, who will later on take it forward. So we're looking to complete this whole process in 7 to 8 months. And that's, in the world of national risk assessment, that's very ambitious.
Okay.
We know many jurisdictions that are doing it, taking more time.
And CAPSA's coming when?
CFATF is coming in fourth quarter, I think, of 2017. And when you hear 2017 is not far away.
Right.
So
Couple of years.
It's not even a couple of years. In money laundering and assessors term, 2017 is 2014. Because when you look at it, you have to be able to demonstrate to assessors that you have a consistent level. And in this assessment, you hear me say that the last assessment we did excellent. But that was a different type of assessment. They were looking at what we call technical compliance. So you had all the laws in place, you had all the procedures in place. We were good at that. Now when they come, they'll look and say, are your laws and procedures effective? So are you catching the money launderers? Are you stopping people from financing terrorism? And that is what you call effectiveness. And that is what we have to develop. And that's what we're trying to do.
They want to make sure the structures are in place.
Well, they want to make sure that the structures are actually preventing that scenario that you earlier described about someone using a car rental to finance terrorism. They want to make sure, yes, you have the structure in place, and that structure is preventing what you said from happening.
It's effective.
Exactly.
Okay. Now, you keep stressing over and over the importance of the information, the importance of the accuracy and the truthfulness of the information. Why is that so important? What would happen if there is inaccurate information, or turned out that the assessors find inaccurate information? What would that mean for the assessment and for the territory, the economic institutions of the territory?
Well, we live right now in a community where a lot of us are talking about the fact of strained resources. And if we carry out a risk assessment that doesn't get the right information for institution, you know what's going to happen? We're going to get the wrong recommendation to government. So we're going to say to government, do X, Y, and Z. They're going to take a limited amount of resources to do X, Y, and Z. And then that may be wrong. We've wasted resources. So that is why we want everyone to be truthful, honest, and they shouldn't worry about what the report would say in terms of all risk. The good thing about a risk assessment that it should tell you what the risks are, and you determine how to address those risks.
It's an opportunity for correction.
Exactly, it is.
Yeah, I think the key point with that is we're taking a look at where we are now in order to get better. So don't look at it as the end all. Look at it as the start of an improvement.
And for our international relationships, our financial international relationships, it is important in order for us to have those relationships strengthened.
Yes, because if we get a bad report, if we get a report in 2017, which will likely be finalized in 2018, what that would say is that the BVI is non-compliant. So we'll be on a high-risk jurisdiction. And, without referring to any particular issue, we know what it is to be quote-unquote blacklisted. You don't want to get into that. It's easier to stay out of any blacklist than to get out when you're already there. It's much more difficult to get off than it is to stay out. So we have always stayed out from the money laundering perspective, and we want to continue that process.
So prevention, what upon a cure?
Could be more.
Now, you have a website. You're saying that persons can go on a website and get additional information, answer the questions on the website. How is that process going to work?
Well, firstly, the website is bvinra.org, and on that website, as you mentioned, you'll be able to utilize or fill out the questionnaires. There'll be information on the whole national risk assessment process, the background. There'll be an area where you can have for your public education committee in terms of gathering information on scenarios and helping the public just generally understand how the process works. There'll be an avenue for the public to send in inquiries. So if you don't understand this, you don't understand that, you will send it to that particular domain and we will field it and respond. So it's still in the process, but I would just encourage people to go and just see it improve.
And that website again is?
bvinra.org.
BVINRA,
Yes.
National Risk Assessment.org, BNRA. All right, cool. Now, there's a phone number. People can call you, or you prefer them not to call and prefer them to go on the website? How does that work?
I think once we get up and running, we prefer people to go on the website, but it's going to be, we're going to set up what we call a secretariat, an NRA secretariat. So anyone who has issues filling out the questionnaire, anyone who have additional issues will be able to call our secretariat. So we're sending out the questionnaire by July 15th, and there will be a fully set up by July 15th. So anyone between July 15th and the end of August when the questionnaire is due who wants to reach out to someone and say, well, I'm having difficulty filling out the questionnaire. Or in fact, if you get a questionnaire and you say, well, why did you send me the questionnaire? Then we could explain to you why we sent you the questionnaire. And one other thing I also like to say is that this is really a national project. There's a lot of institution in the BVI that's involved from a national architecture. It's the Attorney General Chambers, the Financial Investigation Unit, all government agencies that are connected are directly involved into this process. So when you look at it, you're going to look at it from a holistic perspective, and we expect to get a good product, and we expect that everyone, like I said, everyone to respond in, be honest, and give us what you have.
Okay. And of course, you're going to make appointments, you're going to call up the various organizations, schedule times to come by and speak with them, and you want them to have the information that you're going to need readily available so that the visit is more efficient.
Yeah, of course. I mean,
So you're going to tell them what that information needs to be, so when you come, it's going to be ready for presentation.
like I said, the process is not an interrogation.
Right.
When we send you the questionnaire and we come in to discuss it with you, what we come in to discuss is responses or lack of response. We're not coming in there to say to, for example, church is a non-profit organization. We're not going into a church and say you're doing it the wrong way. We're going into the tell us how you're doing it. You know, you didn't fill out this question, or you said this in this question. Is this exactly how you do it? Again, it's only information purposes. We're going to gather that statistical information and make a big picture. So we're not coming in there to interrogate.
So you're not going to say, well, I noticed that you have this process, but this component of the process needs to be strengthened, or you need to add this component of the process. You're not going to be giving that kind of advice.
Because our goal is to go in and see what collectively the process is. And then when the assessors who we're going to train look at that process, they're going to say, this probably overall is not the best process. Or they might see a particular, for example, using MPO again, that has a very good process, and they might say, this is a process we as a jurisdiction should adopt, and they'll make that recommendation. But we don't look at any particular institution and say you're doing it wrong, because we only want data, and we want to interpret that data to say where our risks lie.
All right. We're finally at 3 o'clock. And I just wanted, for you to, is there anything I forgot to ask, anything you want to get out that you think is important? This is a good opportunity to do that.
Yeah, I think from our perspective, this is a national product. This is something we want everybody to get behind. This is something we want everybody to understand. There's no smoke and mirrors here. This is not a trick. This is just a process. This is a process geared towards helping the jurisdiction, making sure that we all live in a vibrant economy, to continue economic activity, to make sure internationally we can be out there and we can say, yes, the BVI as a jurisdiction is compliant, and by saying we're compliant, going to bring what we term good business to the BVI, good investment, whether internally or externally.
And the website to go to again is?
bvinra.org.
Okay. Brother Glenford Malone, Brother Leon Whitley, it was really important and interesting to have you on Spotlight to bring this information to the public. More success with the project. Thanks for coming.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Thanks. Cool. We're going to take a break for our sponsor. We can come back with Reverend Dr. Pastor Mill. Dr. Pastor. My good friend and brother. He's going to be here. We're going to be talking about Heritage Month, upcoming activities for the 6-year celebrations, a lot going on. We're going to bring it all to you. The Gospel Fest is coming up in a few, well, not a few weeks, maybe a month or so, I think it's coming up. We're going to be right back after these words from our sponsor, with Reverend Dr. Pastor Mill, and discussions on Heritage Month. Keep it locked right at the Spotlight.
Spotlight is brought to you by the National Bank of the Virgin Islands, the BVI Tourist Board, and CCT Global Communications.